At the end of episode 5, we saw how Wolsey's plans to bond his new alliance with Francis, King of France, by having Henry VIII married to Francis's sister, Marguerite of Angoulême. Wolsey intended to be rid of Catherine of Aragon, have Henry VIII's marriage annulled, and so be rid of Habsburg influence in England. But his plans were scuppered when he discovered that Marguerite, unbeknown to him, had already married the King of Navarre. In the circumstances, a wise move by a wise woman. Wolsey was in trouble, as we saw, because he had already created a deep animosity between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. He had also made an enemy, a bitter enemy, of her nephew, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, the most powerful man in Christendom. For his own profit and aggrandizement, he intended Henry VIII to formally ally with France and marry into French royalty. But with Marguerite married elsewhere, who now? Where could he find a royal-blooded mademoiselle to marry his nitwit king? Enter Anne Boleyn, or perhaps more accurately, Anne de Boleyn. She was the daughter of Henry VIII's senior diplomat, Thomas Boleyn, and with some fancy juggling of her ancestral pedigree, she became a descendant of royalty, both English and French. She, so Wolsey determined, would be the next Queen of England. Anne would be the new Queen just as soon as Wolsey rid Henry of Catherine of Aragon. The Cardinal had already sown the seeds of doubt in Henry's mind that the reason he had not produced a son with Catherine was because the marriage was not legal. It was not legal, not least because his wife had previously engaged in carnal relations with Henry's brother Arthur. The fault was entirely Catherine's. After all, Henry had already produced a son with Elizabeth Blount, Henry Fitzroy. Fitzroy was the Duke no less, the Duke of both the Duchies of Richmond and Somerset. Wolsey undertook to have Henry's marriage annulled by the Pope. However, Catherine's nephew, Charles V of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor, held sway over the Pope. Nay, he held more than sway. He had him gripped in a vice-like headlock. Charles told the Pope what he could do, and Charles told the Pope what he could not do. As head of the all-powerful Habsburg dynasty, even if hell did freeze over, he would not suffer the indignity of his aunt being humiliated by a divorce contrived by Wolsey and Wolsey's nitwit sovereign. And things became worse for Wolsey because in 1527 Charles's army in Europe sacked Rome. The army, under the command of the Duke of Bourbon, invaded the Holy City and wrecked the place. The invaders killed thousands, many of whom, men, women and children, were robbed, raped and tortured. If that were not bad enough, they captured and imprisoned the Pope. Catherine's nephew, Charles, Holy Roman Emperor, held the pontiff in Rome under lock and key. In these circumstances, there was no prospect whatever of Henry being granted an annulment of his marriage by Pope Clement. However, Wolsey had a plan. He usually did have a plan. Under this plan, while the Pope was incarcerated, he, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, Archbishop of York and Papal Legate, would become the stand-in Pope. He called for a meeting of cardinals, those cardinals who had not been captured, to be held at Avignon. From that meeting, he, Wolsey, would assume all the powers of papal office, which included granting Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon null and void, thus paving the way for a matrimonial union with Anne de Boleyn, and so the Kingdom of France. From such a union, England and France would unite against Charles. Wolsey would emerge as the Pope, and then he would become the most powerful man in Christendom. However, almost in union, the cardinals responded. "On your donkey, Tomo," they said. "You can forget that idea." Within a couple of years, Wolsey was discredited and deposed. A little time after that, he was dead. Henry was still married to Catherine, and Anne Boleyn was still the frustrated, power-hungry figurehead of an opportunist family set on exploiting Henry the Nitwit's kingdom for their own greed, vanity, and depraved self-importance. There was no love affair here. The future of the kingdom was not determined by a nitwit king who had some infatuation with a pseudo-French princess. No, this was hard, ruthless, and brutal politics, played out in a league way above this king's acumen, by the most powerful magnates in Europe. It was being played out for the ultimate prize, control of Europe. But at the same time, there were other forces at work, forces set on extricating Christendom from papal hegemony. How? Don't miss this next exciting episode of Henry VIII The Reign, coming soon on Mark Holinshed's History Channel.